Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another live stream on History Vibe Podcast. And today I'm joined by Bob Price. And today we're covering the Epistle to the Hebrews and why it is not by Paul. Again, the links to purchase Bob's books will be in the description below and the pinned comment, including the Amazing Colossal Apostle, which of this discussion is based, and also a link to Bob's Substack page as well. And that being said, Bob, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, what a lot of fun it always is. Oh, good, entertaining, relaxing thing for me, and a good sedative for the viewers.
So Hebrews doesn't even claim to be written by Paul yet. Many still think it is by Paul for some reason. Why is that?
Probably because they're reading the King James version, which I believe does just say in its title, not in the text, obviously, the Epistle of Paul to the Hebrews, and the reason for that, I guess, is that everybody liked Origen's claim that well, I don't know if he would put it this way, but if it's not by Paul, it might as well be. It seems like, one of the criteria, as odd as it sounds to us, for uh, canonicity in the early days was numerical. Like Irenaeus said, there are four winds, there's four directions on the compass, there are four faces on each of Ezekiel's cherubim. So, well, there's got to be only four gospels. And well, that's absurd enough. But when it came to letters, seven letter collections seemed very significant to the early Christian savants. And they said, now, Paul has letters, more than seven, but at least to seven churches. And if we numbered just all of the letters, there would be 13, but if you add Hebrews, which might be by Paul, that would be 14, two groups of sevens. And there's the seven letters in Revelation, uh, and so on and so on. And so they said, well, though Origen admitted, he says, God alone knows who wrote Hebrews. But it does kind of sound like Paul, with a heavy emphasis on kind of, because it's a little more florid in its eloquence and so on than any of the letters with Paul's name on them. And the theology is easily compatible with what you find in Romans, Galatians, even Colossians, and so forth, though it doesn't really overlap it exactly. There's all this stuff about the temple and or the tabernacle, actually, and this weird stuff with Melchizedek, who is almost another Christ, and so forth. But it does seem to know of the Pauline circle, and it expects the readers to. He mentions a couple of names and so on. And so, could this have been written by, well, Martin Luther? I mean, he was still debating it because he was also coming up with his canon, right? He translated all the familiar New Testament books, but he cut out uh, Jude, James, and Revelation, as I recall. He did put them in there, but he said they really shouldn't be officially canonical. But what the heck? Um, and he thought they did not bear Christ. Take Christ to the reader, the gospel, he meant, the true saving message of justification by grace through faith. But it's close enough. I mean, asking yourself, well, I don't know why Paul got on to this subject matter, but it could be by Paul. But others like Martin Luther said maybe it was written by Barnabas or Clement. somebody in the Pauline circle, and a lot of people have thought, hey, that's not a bad idea. That's pretty good logic. But it seems to me that it was the numerical business that pushed it over the edge. And even today, most people who are Bible readers for a whole different reason than scholars are not really aware of these debates and issues, nor should they be. I mean, I'm not going to call them ignorant or stupid or anything like that, but they're not playing the same game with the text that Bible scholars, whether conservative or liberal, are playing. And I think they've just inherited what they vaguely remember from the use of the King James Version. Nowadays, that's used less and less, but it's probably still the Bible to a lot of people. So who the heck did write it? That still remains an interesting question, and perhaps the most intriguing uh, reason to think so is the one suggested by Benjamin W. Bacon, who was an early American, well, I mean, not going back to the Republic, but earlier in the 20th century, a higher critic and helped. He was one of the first in America to embrace that whole thing. And he said, "I think Priscilla wrote it." Now, when you first hear that one, you think, "Oh, come on, this is some kind of DEI theology, right? Since we don't know who wrote it, let's give this one to a woman." But that's not true. That's not the way Bacon approached it. He said you can eliminate all the other ones, but in an ingenious argument, he says, "Why is this anonymous?" And he says maybe it's because of this trend in the second century and onward to push women out of the spotlight, whereas they had performed a real role in ministry, teaching and baptizing and stuff like the groups like the Marcionites and others continued to do, which was why, no doubt, they were pushed out. So the anonymity might be because a female name was originally there, and they said, "Yeah, nah, that can't be." Now, of course, that's just speculation, but the point is, since it's anonymous, that's all you're left with. You can speculate other theories too, like Barnabas and Clement, which some still uphold, I think. But Bacon said that. Oh, wait a minute. Am I thinking of? I'm sorry. I guess it's too early in the day. It was Bacon who said that Revelation was written by one of the prophesying daughters of Philip. Harnack, I believe, is the one that said that Hebrews was written by Priscilla, and he showed all kinds of interesting. No one of these arguments was really totally convincing, but the whole bunch of them together really do make you stop and think. For instance, because first of all, Priscilla and Aquila appear in Acts and in the Pauline epistles, like Romans and so on, and other ones, as teachers and apparently equals, a ministry team. It was Priscilla and Aquila who taught Apollos and brought him into the club, so to speak. And that's odd, and they don't change it in Bible versions by eliminating Priscilla. And though in the Western text, I believe it is, Codex Bezae and so on, they do switch the order of the names sometimes. It's Aquila and Priscilla. And why would that be? Harnack said that's a step on the way toward just eliminating the name of Priscilla if she was the author of Hebrews. Um, so why is her name given prominence in a time where women's names weren't very much? Well, she must have been, or it would make sense anyway, to explain that by saying that she was the main teacher. And so Harnack says, let's go with that and see what else comes up. Well, in Hebrews 11, you've got this great uh, honor roll of great paragons of faith. And obviously, Priscilla doesn't come up there. She's too recent a figure anyway. But there are several women mentioned. Not a huge whole lot of them, but some are. And Harnack said, can't help but think that's because a woman is trying to say, hey, we're here, right? I mean, we have our heroines, just like you have your heroes of faith. Well, could be. And he had various arguments for that. So it could be. In fact, I kind of think they ought to just start referring to it as the Epistle of Priscilla, but okay, I guess that's never going to happen. So people think it's Paul because, well, what are you going to say? What scholars do say, the writer to the Hebrews, or the writer of the letter to the Hebrews. It's kind of cumbersome. Wouldn't it be good if we could actually slap one name on it? So it's convenient, but it is important that there is no name on it. The most you can really say for sure is that such a person seemed to be in the Pauline circle of Paul and his colleagues, because it sounds enough like him. But even there, that doesn't get you very far, because really, is that saying much more than that whoever wrote this was influenced by the Pauline approach to the gospel? And so all of these things kind of are less impressive once you put them under the microscope, but they're all we've got in the way of coming up with any nominations for the author. And there are actually, the dating comes up, but I'm probably getting ahead of the game. You just asked why people persist in calling it Paul's letter.
What do you make of its mention of the order of Melchizedek and Jesus being a high priest in it?
Melchizedek also seems to have been somewhat suppressed, but did leave footprints more so than these other characters. Melchizedek is of interest to Gnostics and others, partly because of the Jewish, rabbinical speculation as to what it means that he was without known antecedents. As the writer to the Hebrews says, he has neither father nor mother. And one plausible theory is that since Melchizedek appears in Gnostic and other texts as a divine avatar, really, then maybe they got that idea from the apparently trivial fact that in Genesis 14, where he first appears, it does not say Melchizedek, son of so-and-so. Why not? I mean, usually they give some kind of at least a little pedigree of who was related to the character. And like Abraham, Terah was his father, and so on. Who cares? But they put that in there. So some of the rabbis began to think, could that be because he didn't have a father or mother? Just that they didn't just forget who his parents were, but maybe they knew he didn't even have parents. And that's why he appears as an immortal in the Epistle of the Hebrews. Melchizedek, he says, there's much to say about this Melchizedek character. He had neither father nor mother, nor beginning or end of life, but endures forever like the Son of God. Are you saying that he is a son of God? I mean, he doesn't identify him with Jesus, but another of the same kind. We don't. It's very clear that Hebrews has a kind of wisdom Christology, like Colossians, that, and even the Gospel of John, that Jesus is understood to have been um, incarnate wisdom, or the Logos incarnate, and so that wouldn't be all that odd to find this in Hebrews, and Hebrews adds on to it. Well, like Melchizedek, he's maybe another one of these. Just like in Hinduism, you got different avatars of Vishnu and of Shiva and so on. That seems a little odd, but only because not much is made of it in standard Protestantism and Catholicism. Well, in Gnosticism, they gave him a higher role still, that he had an ongoing baptismal purification function in heaven. St. Augustine tells us in a sermon that some Christians esteemed Melchizedek as higher than Jesus. And he's saying, now, wait a minute, let's not let this thing get out of hand. And there were Melchizedek sects where he was the big name. And apparently there were Gnostic ones and non-Gnostic ones. And it looks like that in the Nag Hammadi text, Melchizedek, I mean, there's a whole biblical type book devoted to this guy. They seem to oh, I'm sorry, the reference that there were two types. Yeah, in this Melchizedek document, there are signs of having a Melchizedek Gnostic sect and a Melchizedek speculative, but not necessarily Gnostic sect, that have been combined. Now, what would that tell you? Well, that probably that implies that, I think, anyway, that there were these two different groups, each of which esteemed him very highly, but in a different theological framework. But as time went on, both of them shrank. I pastored a church for about 6 years that was both American Baptist churches and Southern Baptist Convention, because both of these congregations, which each of them went back decades, by the time I got there, they had shrunk down to a very small number and had recently fused together. And by the way, church growth specialists say that you're wasting your time. That never works, because within a year, you find that of the two joining churches, the combined church has shrunk to the same amount as the lesser of the joining churches, because people somehow won't like the other congregation or the way they do things, and they say, I'm going to another bigger church elsewhere. So the Southern Baptists and the American Baptists had quite a split. That's why they exist as two different denominations. But what are you going to do if you're shrinking to the vanishing point? Well, I guess we can bury a couple of hatchets and get together. And it looks to me like that you had these two Melchizedekian groups saying, okay, let's de-emphasize some things. At least we're all in rooting for old Mel, and that in Augustine's day, I don't know which one he's referring to, but or maybe the United version, he's saying, now hold on a minute. Melchizedek was great, whoever he was, but he does not the equal of Jesus, much less better. And so why does he get brought up in the letter to the Hebrews? Oh, well, they liked him at Qumran too. In fact, there is a fragment of a scroll that survives where it speaks of an apocalyptic coming of Melchizedek at the end of times. And it gives as a scriptural citation for the fact that he will come. It says, just like it says, Behold, O Israel, your God comes in judgment, or whatever it is. Your God? Melchizedek was a divine incarnation? Well, that was the Dead Sea Scrolls people, and they had a couple of other messiahs too in the wings. And so that Hebrews is actually somewhat modest compared to some of the other Christian and proto-Christian um, venerations of Melchizedek. But why is he brought up in Hebrews? I get the impression that he doesn't, well, he does, whoever wrote it, he or she, had a high view of Melchizedek. After all, they depict him as an immortal, like the Son of God. But the reason he comes into the argument is that the writer wants to make Jesus the heavenly high priest who forever offers his shed blood as an atoning sacrifice for human beings. And the problem is that Jesus was not a Levite. How, if he was son of David, right? He's part of the Davidic dynasty, part of the tribe of Judah. He's not a priestly descendant. So what the writer to the Hebrews has to do is to do a workaround. And he says, okay, he wasn't a Levite, but he was something better. Because let's look at, he was part of the Melchizedek priest. And how is Melchizedek depicted as a priest in Genesis 14? Well, there aren't any Levites yet because he's a contemporary of Abraham. And Abraham makes an offering to Melchizedek. How do the Levites figure into this? Well, they all exist in seed form in Father Abraham, the father of all the tribes. So in a sense, you could say that the Levites were offering sacrifice or whatever to Melchizedek. Aha, bingo. Jesus is, as a Davidite, is heir to the tradition of the Melchizedek priesthood of Jerusalem. Psalm 110. The Lord said unto my Lord, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool, and so on and so on. And it says, you are a priest according to the order of Melchizedek, who was a king and a priest. And this was an issue that came up in the Hasmonean times because these guys, Judah, Maccabee, and his brethren, they were in effect, or the later ones in legally even, the kings, while they had independence, but they were Levite priests. And so how are they going to justify that? Well, Melchizedek, I'm guessing. And the same logic is applied to Jesus. So he came in handy. But as far as I know, there's no group today that gives Melchizedek any kind of divine status. But who knows? I mean, anything you can think of is probably believed or done someplace.
We got a super chat question from Constellation Pegasus. Thank you for your super chat. Are these so-called letters of Paul and later Gospels the evidence we need of competing Christian groups? It explains the contradictions in different theologies and competitions. Yeah, I know, a silly question to ask.
Let me just I missed a crucial word there, I think. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I think that's right. The letters of attributed to Paul, all we need to know to make the point you're making is that he has these enemies, these theological enemies in view all the time. The circumcision party, those who are adherents of the of the gnosis, so-called, which I think are Marcionites. He seems to know Gnostics, as Schmidthal shows in First Corinthians. So it's all over the place there. And the weird statement in Philippians, there are enemies of Paul that are just trying to make trouble for him by preaching the gospel, as if they don't believe it. They're just pretending to, which of course is absurd. If Paul is in jail because he's preaching the gospel, you're going to make it hotter for him by preaching it yourself. You're going to wind up in the next cell beside him. But nonetheless, that's like mudslinging at people who are not Paulinists but are Christians. And so, yeah, you are right. Who's he talking about? He can say that he can make some odd remark against non-Christian Jews or Gentile pagans, but those are pretty clear. When he says, stay away from those who don't teach sound doctrine, well, he's talking about Christians with whom he disagrees. So you are certainly correct. The Gospels too. Why do they have different Christologies? Sometimes big differences, sometimes small ones. What's this business about the strange exorcist? Oh, Lord, you'll be happy to know that we ran across some guy working our side of the street, casting out demons in your name. But we told him to cease and desist because he's not in our club. And Jesus says, you did what? It's look, anybody that's not our enemy is our friend. We need all the friends we can get. Well, that's certainly, I think it is a statement on behalf of Paul. The reader is supposed to recognize. Okay, he's not one of the 12. So what? He's better. So surely you are right. There are all sorts of references to the disunity. In fact, one of the major purposes of Acts is to produce a what they call a usable past, to redraw the lines of early Christianity to say everything was a harmonious, seamless fabric. Paul's speeches sound just like Peter's because they really preach the same thing. And the Hellenists versus the Hebrews, that was just administrative confusion. Really, that can't be, and so on and so forth. So yes, I think you're right on the money, as I would expect from good old constellation.
Does Hebrews differ from Paul's on the theology in Paul's epistles in any way?
Well, it sounds kind of like Colossians in terms of trying to assert the preeminence of Jesus, that he's not one more divine emanation or something, and that he ranks higher than that. Because like in Gnosticism, the Christ was one of the many ions from the pleroma. Well, in Colossians and in Hebrews, you have a rejection of that idea. But that kind of stuff doesn't come up in like Romans, Galatians, and so forth. That might denote a difference in Pauline versus Paulinist, later developments, Christology, but it might just mean that certain issues were in view in one epistle that just don't happen to get treated in another because there wasn't a problem about it. Like, for instance, in 3 Corinthians, yes, there is such a beast. This circulated independently before it became part of the Acts of Paul. It's still by itself in the canon of the Armenian Orthodox Monophysite Church. And because you don't hear that very often in Protestant churches. Brethren, turn with me to 3 Corinthians. Well, in that one, Paul has been asked, what do you think about the virgin birth doctrine? And he said, oh, yes, that's true. That's exactly what happened. That never comes up anywhere in the Pauline epistles. That doesn't necessarily mean Paul didn't believe in it, but you can't assume he did since he doesn't say anything about it. But maybe that's why somebody wrote Third Corinthians, to try to say, yes, he did. If it's got to be Pauline for you to believe it, okay, now it is Pauline. But how many of these other things, like Gordon Fee, a professor of mine, used to say, these epistles are all occasional. Something led Paul or whoever to write them. Some issue had come up, and he says, if all we had was First Corinthians and its discussion of the Lord's Supper and the Eucharist, would we even know that it was common to all Christians? I mean, some people would be saying, "Oh, this must have been unique to Corinth." Other factors kind of rule that out, but he had a point. Just because something, or were other congregations speaking in tongues? There's no occasion to mention it. That doesn't mean that they didn't do it. It might mean that, but it may just mean they didn't have a problem with it that they had to seek help for. And because Acts knows about speaking in tongues, though they seem to define it differently. But there's no other reference to it in other epistles. So, or the others simply don't mention it. Does that mean they didn't know about it? The same thing here. So different emphases may be compatible with one another, though there are various contradictions on. Let's see. I think you got a very different soteriology, a very different um, doctrine of atonement in Hebrews, because it talks about this heavenly ministry of Christ on our behalf. Now, that you could say that's intimated in First John. Uh, uh, if we sin, if we confess our sins, he's faithful and just to forgive us our sins, because we have an advocate with the Father. And in Romans chapter 8, I think, that, oh, I forget the exact wording of the verse, that through Christ we have an intercessor with the Father. And it's sort of like the guy, the beloved disciple, whoever he is in the Gospel of John, that gets Peter into the courtyard of the high priest because he's got connections. Well, I'm standing before God like Dorothy before the Wizard of Oz. What chance have I got? Come on. Well, hey, that's all right, because his son, who mediated for us by dying for our sins, he's pleading on our behalf, which is itself kind of an unsettling idea, because doesn't that imply God would be saying, drop him down the chute? This guy told a fib once. And Jesus said, whoa, Dad, wait a minute here. You're not going to have anybody left to worship. Give this guy a break. And of course, in Catholicism, that was kind of transferred over to Mary. She's the one that is pleading on our behalf, which brings to mind one of my favorite theological jokes. This little old Catholic lady shows up at church one night, and she's got a rosary, and she starts praying to the novena or whatever it is, to Mary. And suddenly the ceiling disappears, and she's got a direct vision of heaven, and there's Jesus on the golden throne. And he says, my daughter, your prayer has been heard. What would you have of me? And the old lady says, shut up, I'm a talking to your mother. That's right. She becomes even more important almost. And here's where you have Jacob's supposed to hit the button for the laugh track to come in. But but so there are differences, but there are some contradictions, it would seem to me. And the role of Satan might be one of them, but but I don't want to bore everybody into a coma by going off on that trail.
What do you think about that salutation to Italy, the greetings from Italy that they greet you from Italy thing at the end of Hebrews, near the end of it?
Yeah, that's as trivial as it seems. This is a bone of contention too. I don't know if anybody gets too mad about it, because you could say this denotes that Hebrews is a letter to Rome, and they're saying, "Hey, the Romans visiting us, so say tell the folks back home hello." Or you could say that that the letter is from Rome, and the writer is saying, "Well, here I am in Rome, and everybody says to say hi." You know, it could equally grammatically be either one, and that's a nuisance because it would help if you could say, "Well, if this comes from the Roman Church, and it's all about sticking by Christianity in a time of persecution, that it might be safer to go back to Judaism, then well, we know something we don't otherwise know. It might help us get a time as well as a place, but all we really know for sure, in at least the ostensible time of Paul, is that you had Claudius kicking all the Jews out of Rome. Um, but were there Christians that early? I mean, Nero gave them a hard time, or so we're told, in a possibly dubious passage of Tacitus. But who is being persecuted, or is there a persecution? I guess the Roman association might weigh on that, might be a thumb on that scale. But I always used to hear that yeah, Christians are being persecuted, and there were Jews who would become Christians, which is pretty obvious in the epistle to the Romans. And they're saying, "Look, I didn't bargain for this when I got baptized. I'm afraid I'm going back to the synagogue, where at least they won't be hunting me down." But later I realized that some commentators say no. It's just that they were thinking of going back to Judaism because they missed it or something. And they weren't necessarily being persecuted. Well, that's true. He warns of persecution, but is it actually supposed to be happening there? We're not really sure. It's just saying don't apostatize. Don't go back to Judaism. There's nothing for you there. That was all predicated on stuff that's been swept away by history. And that's significant because it sort of implies that all of this tabernacle, it isn't the temple, it's the tabernacle he talks about, that Jesus is like the high priest presenting the sacrificial blood that used to flow in his veins on the behalf of his people. That kind of sounds like one of the post 70 CE readjustments, like, geez, you can't offer a sacrifice anymore because since Deuteronomy, we're told that there's only one place to sacrifice, and now there's no place to sacrifice. We can't just go, make an altar out of the barbecue pit in the backyard like they could before the temple. What do we do? And they said, well, we could view suffering and sickness as a means of atoning for your own sins. It would give you brownie points, kind of. Or a persecution, suffering under that, being sick, good deeds, helping other people, maybe that atones for it. And of course, the Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, post-exilic invention, that's you think of Psalm 139, I think it is, the blood curdling psalm about bashing babies' brains in. Yes, it is there. It's the writer is a Levitical singer and musician, and he remembers the good old days of performing hymns and psalms in the temple, and now his captors are saying, "Hey, you're a musician. Sing us one of those holy songs." How can I do that when I'm far from Israel? That might be the same thing going on there, that you can't do business as usual with God without the temple. So what might substitute for it? Well, maybe the atonement of the Messiah. Hey, that doesn't demand any particular location. And so maybe that's why Jesus had to do what he did and die for humanity, because the sacrificial system was moribund. And this was an appealing thing as a kind of second best, but really first best thing. It mitigates the loss of the temple by saying, "Hey, something better, something even more effective." I mean, the old sacrifices, you had to keep doing them because they couldn't get out the stain from the laundry of your soul. But here's the new Jesus detergent that can. There's that would imply a date too late for the conventional date of Paul. But I'm trailing off as I usually do. You know how it is with us 71-year-olds. We're wool gathering, and you can't keep us on the topic.
I want to correct myself slightly. It didn't say high priest in the order of Melchizedek when I brought that up earlier. It just said priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. But anyway, my last question: what do you make of the arguments that some make that Hebrews is pre-70 CE because Hebrews seems to be aware that sacrifice is still continuing, as if Jerusalem is still standing? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think that's much of an argument, simply by the fact that he's talking about the tabernacle. He says Moses saw the pattern and all that stuff. Ezekiel saw the pattern for a temple, but he's talking about Moses and the tabernacle. And the present tense is simply expositional present. Here's what you do. And Josephus talks about, he does talk about the temple that's gone, but he does, in his description, again, it's present tense. That just doesn't prove anything. It's just like all is as it was, only you are there. Because the whole rest of the epistle makes it clear that the temple is, or the sacrifices, let's say, are over. And now it's Jesus. So it seems to me you wouldn't really have the occasion to say that if there were a functioning temple that even diaspora Jews could occasionally attend. But nope.
All right. So I just want to remind everybody real quick, the link to purchase The Amazing Colossal Apostle will be in the description below in the pinned comment, including the links to Bob's other books he's written and published over the years, and his Substack page as well. And with that being said, Bob, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Hello, viewers. Thanks for watching this video from the History Valley YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And if any of you wish to further support this channel, please consider checking out this channel's Patreon page and becoming a patron, and/or donate through PayPal or through Super Chat during your live stream. Thank you.